This video is for business leaders who want a better critical thinking, problem solving, and decision-making process. Or rather that, but also and more to the point, mindsets and frameworks in terms of how to do this better. So watch to the end of this video to get bonus insights, materials, and recommended videos. They'll make a lot more sense, that both the reference and the material within them will make a lot more sense after you've actually watched this video. So when it comes to wicked problem solving, like forecasting, researcher Phillip E. Tetlock and Dan Gardner, who wrote a book about super forecasters, found that the more confident and certain experts, now these were recognized experts, were in their predictions and the way the world worked, the less likely they were to be right. And this is especially informative to all of us, especially business leaders, who of course are confident. They're the leaders, they're the people who founded the business, or the ones who were associated with the founding of a business or the creation of a business. So they have reason to be confident, but they also have reason to be humble, which is a little bit more about what this video is going to be about. So super forecasters, in fact, were those who were less certain and more open to alternative ideas and their own uncertainty about ideas. That was, they were confident in certain aspects of themselves and their knowledge, but they were also open to having their mind changed in the right, under the right conditions. So getting back to Phillip E. Tetlock, he references, I'll put a link there to a cool YouTube video that briefly describes this, Foxes and Hedgehogs. Now this is based on something out of Greek philosophy, or perhaps even something like Aesop's fables, about the fox, which knows many things, and the hedgehog, which knows but one. So forecasting foxes know many things and recognize the world is complex, so they're less certain, but tend, as a result of being less certain, to be more accurate. The hiding hedgehogs, that is those who know one thing, they are an expert in one area and highly confident, certain of what they know, with a high degree of confidence and certainty, are more often wrong compared to their foxy friends. So the key attributes, and I'll put another link here to another video for you, from the same video, in fact, just a different section about how super forecasters have a valuable mindset that we can all learn from if we're not already super forecasters. And that's the idea of, what would it take to convince you you're wrong? So as the recipient of that argument, or as the proposer of that argument, we should be thinking, okay, what is it that would make us convinced that we're wrong about our position? Or what is it that we could say to somebody else which would convince them they were wrong about their position? Well, this has to be credible, not just something that sounds good, but something that's credible and something that can then be backed up. So the key attributes, though, of these super forecasters were teamwork, which is why I chose the picture here that I did, is because people tend to, what's called the wisdom of the crowd. The crowd tends to be wiser than any individual, regardless of his credentials or her credentials and their intelligence. That those who are exceptional at making forecasts tend to think in terms of probabilities. I think this about qualifying language, like in most cases, it seems that the majority of the time, at least using that kind of language opens you up to the possibility that these are probabilistic, because everything is probabilistic. There is not the kind of cut and dried certainty that only tends to exist, well, almost nowhere in the real world. Let's be very clear about that. So that they think the best forecasters, the super forecasters, tend to think in terms of probabilities. The probability something is right, the chances, that they probably also, I'm going to speculate and go so far as to say, think analytically or statistically. not just probabilistically, which is obviously related. That they draw from knowledge from a lot of sources, that super forecasters tend to have a broad knowledge base. Not only may they be deep in a particular area of expertise, but they sample and learn widely. The last part, and this is associated with the last two parts, in fact, is that super forecasters tend to have a willingness to own up to their own mistakes, to know that they're not certain and admit when they're not certain, or admit when they make mistakes. Now, this leads to another part, which I've broken out into two instead of the one as it was originally presented in the research I did. And that is, as a result of the fact that they're willing to own up to their mistakes, they're open to taking a different approach, which loops back also into the eclectic knowledge base. So I will also put, I can't put the link there, but I'll put it in the description, and that is to something written by Phillip E. Tetlock himself in Decision Labs, and some of the work that he does, which references some of the stuff I've said today. So understand that forecasting is a wicked problem, and that forecasting is a critical thinking process that involves problem solving and decision making skills. So if we take that and we extend that to our business leadership, we can understand that what super forecasters do is what we can do as business leaders to make better, superior decisions. It's not about our certainty, but more likely our uncertainty and our ability to be open to credible evidence from others. And I really love this because it relates also back to Ray Dalio's arguments in his book Principles about how if you have a credible argument, regardless of your status in the company, from the janitor on up, you have to bring up your objections if you disagree with the experts or the boss. And I think this is something we all have to be open to make the best decisions, is to be aware we don't know what we don't know. So the best decision makers have what, and I love this words. I'm not sure if he's the original person to say it, but Bob Sutton said it in saying that the best decision makers have strong opinions weakly held. So I'm going to give you two brief examples of this where I have had strong opinions or fairly strong opinions weakly held. The first is in solar cells. I have an article that I wrote on LinkedIn called Solar Cells Aren't Green. And though I was never impressed with the efficiency or cost of solar cells, I had always been interested, but thought because of their lacking efficiency and high price that they weren't necessarily the best solution. And then I learned that solar cells are basically high carbon footprint toxic waste with no circular process. That is, though we can make solar cells that work now at lower cost, they're not really recyclable in an efficient way. They take a tremendous amount of energy both to make and to recycle, and the recycling isn't there. So they're not circular, and it really comes out to solar cells, which everybody thinks are green, are not green. I had my mind changed by finding credible evidence that argued why solar cells are really not the solution, but are just kicking the can down the road about 20 years, where we're going to have now another problem on top of the current problem in terms of a tremendous amount of toxic waste, which if we don't address that, solar cells will remain to not be green. So that's one example of an opinion held that solar cells are green. That's a largely held opinion. And I'll show you evidence that changed my mind, that I hope changes your mind too, of how solar cells are not green at this point until we can add circularity, the life cycle, the green life cycle, where we can recycle this stuff in a way that makes it truly green instead of only green until the solar cell fails and then becomes toxic waste. And then the other one is learning styles don't exist. I am a teacher. I have been teaching for 16 years now, and it is intuitive for we teachers, and I had held it myself for a long time, that learning styles exist. Some are visual learners, some are kinesthetic learners. It turns out that's entirely wrong. And the person who changed my mind was, first of all, Adam Grant, because he was credible to me, because I know of his writing and his books and have read them, and because of his argument in Think Again, which showed me how it could seem intuitively like learning styles existed, while demonstrating empirically and probabilistically that, in fact, learning styles do not exist. So he convinced me of something that I still struggle with, but logically and scientifically, I now know that learning styles don't exist. And if you question that, fair enough, I understand. I did too. I'll put another link there to a Veritasium video, which I believe is called You Are Not a Visual Learner, which argues and goes through the same argument as to why learning styles do not exist. So no matter how much you know, and how confident you are in what you know, you're more likely to be correct if you're, first of all, we're now to the, not quite to the bonus material. You're more likely to be correct if you're ever mindful of your own ignorance. That is, that you're aware that there is stuff you have no idea that you don't know, which we've already covered, open to new and alternative ideas, willing to let go of your ideas, that strong opinions, weakly held concepts, but only in the face of compelling new evidence that contradicts your current position. Now we're at the bonus material and right to the end of this video. Thank you for staying. I hope this is giving you some value thus far, and this gives you even more value. And that is to stay flexible and open in your thinking, learn broadly. We've already talked about this, but this is really important. In addition to learning what you're an expert at, learn in other things. That is, seek to learn about topics of which you have no idea about. Like, oh, I don't know anything about that. That's an area where you should focus on doing at least some learning so that you learn what you didn't have any idea you did not know. Now, when you do that, though, remain skeptical and yet open, and that is still expecting empirical evidence to say, well, I'm not sure I really believe that, prove it, which is exactly the experience I had with the learning styles don't exist. Now, the recommended videos are, and I will put one right there, Frames for Entrepreneurs. And a second one, I usually only do one, but I'm doing two today. That is Self-Control is Not Self-Esteem. And I will put it, you guessed it, right there. Of course, I'll put all the links, both the shared videos and the other ones, in the description as well, if you're not getting them from the source where I've originally posted this. This is it for Crush It Club 211, Critical Thinking Process, Problem Solving, and Decision-Making Skills. Crush It Club 211. My name is Tim B. Green. Bye for now.